Alright guys, welcome to the third and long awaited tutorial in my beginning program tutorial series. I've ditched the slide approach that I adopted in the first two videos. This approach hopefully is more interactive. I'm recording the videos, and as I'm recording I'll be writing on the whiteboard and explaining these concepts, so it's sort of a more interactive way of teaching. Feedback would be appreciated at the end of this tutorial, so leave a comment if you think that I should go back to the slide approach. Otherwise, if you think this is the way forward, then also leave a comment and let me know that, just so I get a good idea on a good average of who thinks, who favours what approach. Okay, so let's get straight into this. Okay, so variables, constants, and comments. Okay, so in programming, what you have is you have variables, which are entities. So you can have one variable. So let's say this is my variable. So it looks like a box, right? That's my variable, and it looks like a box. Essentially, that is what a variable is. It is a box, okay? And what happens is when you declare a variable, declare just means, when you get a new variable. So say I've got my new variable, this is my new box, okay? When you declare a variable, obviously, what happens is, the variable at first is empty. My box is empty. At the moment, there's nothing in my box. So what we've got an empty variable. So when we declare a variable is normally empty. Okay, so up to this point, variable is a box. It's an empty box, hasn't got anything inside it when we declare it. Okay, so there's a two-step process. There's declaring a variable, and we've said already that if you declare a variable, the variable is empty, but it has got, it's a box, so you have got some storage that you can put something inside the variable. The next step, as you might have guessed, is to initialize that variable. Initialize is basically a fancy word for saying, let's put something in this box. That's all it is. Let's put something in our variable. Okay? Now the question might arise as to, why is it that we need to have something inside? Why do we need to have this? Why do we have this in programming? Why is it we have this variable in programming? Well, if you think about programs, fancy programs or even basic programs, what they need to work with, data. Okay? For programs to do things that are interesting, like programs like anything from a website that stores details about students, or anything like a program like Microsoft Word, or even a game, you need to be able to store data, so then you can work with that data in your program. Okay? So the most obvious example is that, Microsoft Word, for example, it has a list of fonts. So pretend this is Word here, okay, and you can, when you type something, you can select a font, okay. Now that's pulling in some data from, your directory. You've got a list of fonts somewhere stored on your computer. Microsoft Word pulls those fonts and then renders them so that you can use them in the application. And when it pulls them in, it stores them temporarily. So, that's just a classic example of, when data is being used and when data is being stored. But in general, whenever any program that you make, you always want to be able to work with data, especially if you want to make an interesting program. Okay, so that's what a variable is. So, variable is a box. At first, you declare a variable, and then you initialize it as well, so you can put something inside it. But what you can also do is you can take something out of it. You can empty your box. After you've put something inside it, you can take something back out. And that's why you have that vary at the beginning, because it changes. It varies. The contents vary depending upon whether or not you want to change it. So, as an example, if you've done maths before, you can have something like x being equal to 3. Okay? Well, okay, x is equal to 3. Might want to change that now. I want to make x equal to 2. Okay? X is a variable. It can change. Okay? Now that can be a problem. That sometimes can be a problem. For example, we know, if you know maths, pi is what? 3.14 dot 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 dot. Okay? Imagine someone, we wrote a program that worked with pi and, done calculations with pi that calculate the area of a circle and whatnot. Imagine someone went in our program and then changed the value of pi. What would our program do? It would explode. No, I'm only joking, but it would do something which is incorrect. So it would do something. So then, the main thing is that when someone's using our program, we don't want them to be able to change these values. And that's one of the problems of variables, is because it varies, someone can change the contents of our variable. And that's why you have, in programming, you have what's known as a constant. Let me just take these off the screen. You have what's known as a constant. So we've talked about variables. Okay, what a constant is x. Think of x being equal to, sorry, let me just rub that out. Think of x being equal to 6. Our constant is x, and with a constant, it doesn't change. It doesn't change, okay? So, again, what we can do, we can have the box analogy. So we say this is our box. We'll say it's a constant, right? Constant in that anything you put inside this box, once you put it in, you can never take it out. Once you put an orange in this box, that orange is staying there, and you're not allowed to add anything else. Not allowed to add anything like an apple or a pencil or anything. That's what constant is. It's something, at first the programmer says, okay, I want x to equal 6, but after that, that's it. No one can change that. X will always remain as 6. It's something that will not change, and that's essentially what a constant is. So it defeats the problem of, for example, when a user is using your program, if you don't want them to change values, then use constants as opposed to variables. Okay, so that's what a constant is. So variables and constants, hopefully that's covered so far. And lastly, we have comments. Say when we're writing our code. So most people, they use Notepad to write code. And then you have what's known as IDEs, which I'll cover in later tutorials, but just as a snippet, IDE is an integrated development environment whereby you can, you can write code, and the program, it's essentially a program that you just write code in. It's much better than Notepad. Notepad's just basic, and some are specific to a language. So you might have a Java IDE where it's made for you to write Java programs, but that's a whole nother tutorial. Okay, so people write programs using Notepad. Okay, so that's the example we're going to take. Okay, so here's me writing my code. Okay, what about if we've got a little man, we've got two people here, two developers, two programmers. Pretend this is me. I've wrote those 4 lines of code. Say I asked for his help. I said to him, I want you to finish off the program. I can't finish off. I haven't got time tonight. Okay, then he says, okay. He looks at the program and he's like, okay, I don't understand anything. I don't understand. That's a problem there. If you're working for a company or working with other developers, what you need to do, it's a common practice that you write code that other people can understand. And what do I mean by that? Well, as well as writing, your code, what you include are what's known as comments. And what these comments are, these are human readable comments, such that when this person comes to your program, he can read and understand them, and thereafter understand what your program does. One of the more important things is that, Notepad, when it comes to saving this program, it will look at all of this and it'll be like, okay, this is your code. You'll understand that these 4 lines are your code, but then it will understand this is comment and it will ignore that. That's the most important thing, and that's one of the best things about programming, is that you can have comments in your programs which are ignored. So when you compile your program, the compiler, or Notepad in this example, will completely ignore your comments, but they'll always be there. So anyone that comes to your program or reads your program can read those comments and understand what's going on. And Notepad will only compile your code. Okay. Now, it might get a bit more technical later on, but as long as you've understood what I mean by comments, in that you need to make sure you always have comments in your program. It's good practice, especially when like I said, if you're working for a company, if you're working with someone, they need to be able to understand your program. And comments are there for them to do so. And again, one of the best things is that, compilers and IDEs and Notepad, wherever you write your code, what they can do, they'll recognize your comment and they'll completely ignore it. They won't include it as part of the program. They'll be able to detect what's your code and what's not your code. What's not your code is your comments, and that's one of the neat things. So that's about it. I hope that this tutorial has covered everything: variables, constants, comments. In the next tutorial, what we'll go over conditions. Okay. Again, I appreciate if you could give me any comments, ratings, and feedback, and let me know if you haven't understood anything. Always, you can always go to pcb0x.net. That's my blogging website. There is all the tutorials there. If you have any questions, you're confused about anything, or you just genuinely want to know something, you want to say something, go on there, write a comment there. If you do that over there, then I'll get back to you within the same day. If you comment on my YouTube channel, then it's more likely that I'll take much longer because I don't log into my YouTube very often. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.